Okay, and so as the clock rolls over to 4:05, I want to give a big SPIMA welcome to Alex Mohamed and Alex Felton. Thank you guys so much for joining us. Adam, all the way from Dunedin, Florida, and Alex, where are you?
I
Oh,
was actually in
sorry.
the office today, but I'm at home in Brampton, Ontario.
Okay, welcome. So the wonders of technology have brought us together. So it's nice to see you guys. I've been to Dunedin once, and it was back in the. I got a chance to see at the time. Carlos Delgado was playing back catcher for the Dunedin Blue Jays. Sean Green was in right. Yeah, he was in right field, and Alex Gonzalez was the starting shortstop. So that was the threesome of the day. Such great memories, and getting to meet Carlos Delgado and all his gear after one of the games was a highlight for me back when I was, I think, 7 years old. So anyway, pleasure to have you guys. Welcome on behalf of SPIMA 2P21. For those that don't know, Adam is the manager for baseball communications. Alex is a program specialist, community and indigenous programs with Jays Care. Thank you for joining us. Interested to hear some of your insights and experiences with the Toronto Blue Jays. That will add a lot to our course content. So I appreciate you taking some time out of your days. I thought we might start with a little bit of give you guys a chance to reflect a little bit on your time in the Department of Sport Management. I wonder, maybe Adam, if I could start with you. What are some of your fondest memories from SPIMA? What comes to mind when I say SPIMA or the Department of Sport Management?
Yeah, I mean, what comes to my mind is, and I know it's been a difficult couple of years for everyone who's been in school, but for me, it was, the campus and the people I went to class with every day. And for me, it was like a really big jump it was a steep learning curve to go from high school to university. Um, and I think, year one really kind of shook me a little bit. And then by year two, I was a little more studious. And I think, especially when I think of my second year, that's what I think of is kind of buckling down a little bit and getting a little more serious with my courses.
And Alex, how about you? What comes to mind? What are some of your fondest memories?
I think for myself, it's very similar to Adam. Like you're going to class every day, and you're getting to see classmates and things like that. I know the program has grown since we've been there. I want to say like in our year we had maybe less than 100 people graduate from the program. I think when we started it was like 150, and now I think like over 200, maybe close to 300 kids get accepted or prospective students every year. So that was cool. And then I think yeah, as we went into like our second year, first year, you're just figuring out being in university, like for some of us living away from home and things like that. And your second year, you're maybe looking for an on-campus job, you're looking for a job in the community or whatever it is, or how you can get involved because now you got your feet grounded a little bit, you're used to being away. And I think yeah, just the idea of being in a community I think is really cool about university. I think like Adam just said there earlier, it's been tough for say second year students now. They've had a little bit of it and then it taken away. And of course, right now we're in a virtual setting, whereas you might have been in a classroom doing it before. So
Yeah, there's certainly been a lot of back and forth. Um, I wonder if you could imagine yourselves back in second year, where was your head at from a career perspective? Like, was this always the goal? Or what do you think? If I'd asked you what your aspirations were back then, what might you have said?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I think it's one thing to say you're focused on working in sports when you're in sport management. But a lot of my classmates, like, they weren't sold on it. They knew they loved it and they knew they wanted to work in it, but when push came to shove, like, it was okay if they didn't end up there. And for me, I don't think I ever really focused on communications or the media side of things until my final semester before my internship. But in second year, again, just going back to taking everything a little more seriously, and even leaning into what Alex was saying, volunteering my time, which we can get into later. It was really just if knowing if I wanted to get into it, that I really had to buckle down.
Yeah, I had a similar experience in university. I must admit, it didn't click for me in second year. It was probably closer to third, fourth year. When I look back, I can say I really turned it on, and became a professional student in my mind, even if I wasn't, being paid. That became a job and something that I took a little bit more seriously. What did sort of turning it on or taking it more seriously look like for you?
I mean, for me, it was my roommate at the time. Like my first year, I didn't live with him. He was my friend from high school, and he was also in sport management. And then having to actually room with him, for him, it was just like, I'm gonna go out to Isaac's, and he's like, nah, I'm gonna do this project, and that was a bit of a, oh, okay, well, I'll stay behind and do that instead, and eventually just got into a rhythm. And once you see the results of actually doing that, and especially now reflecting back on it, I mean, I tell him all the time, his name's John Hanley, he used to work for the Tiger Cats. I tell him all the time, I probably wouldn't have made it without him, and he definitely turned my university career around for sure.
And Alex, how about you?
No, I think for myself, it's very similar to Adam there. I think, if I'm being honest, in my second year, I think when we came into sport management, there's always a thing of like, if you want to work in sport and do something you love, you might work long hours, the pay might not be to that level that you might aspire to be in, or whatever it is. Like you got to do it because like that's what you want to do. And if in my second year, I probably thought I wouldn't work for a professional sport org, or like had landed something like this, because I think like in my head, or what was being told to me, were that we only have so many professional sports teams, or even like sport jobs in a realm, or where we live. So I think it's hard to imagine yourself in one. And now when you kind of reflect back, you're like, whoa, I don't even know if I had that much confidence in my own abilities at the time. And I think, yeah, like just finding other ways, or like taking every opportunity as it came, I think was like a big part in that, regardless of what it looks like. But yeah, if I would have gone back to second year, yeah, I would have probably said, I probably thought I would have had a job in this role. I'd have probably said like, that's for a really lucky or very intelligent or very well versed person. And now we kind of sit there and reflect back, and it's like, whoa, it's pretty cool to say.
Well, that's awesome. Yeah, and I think you might be a little too humble in your response. I had a chance to browse your LinkedIn, and there's a progression there. I mean, you can see, going back to your high school days and your time at Brock University, you were investing in your career prospects. Your story, just at a glance, and we're not, best friends, we don't go back a million years, but it looks to me like you're somebody who took their career, seriously, even from an
Yeah,
early age.
I think the other thing to that is like very similar to being a student. I think being like an industry professional, you come from your high school or wherever you're from, and you might be one of some that's like the sports person in your circle or has lots of experience. When you came to university, you're just like surrounded. It's almost like sport. Like you might be the best in your state, if we're saying baseball players, but when you come to like a bigger area, or like the draft is coming around, there are players from all across the world that are that versed, right? And I think, yeah, you only do what you can wherever you're from. But I think at the end of the day, like where we are now, or the positions that we're in, obviously it was due to some of the things that we had. But looking back, it's hard, really hard to say. I can remember, Adam, I don't know if you remember this. I think it was Professor Chard in like one of our first year classes said something like, or maybe it was Hyatt, said something like, who here in this room wants to be like the GM of a professional sports team? And you just saw like 150 kids, and like maybe like 75 put up their hand, you know what I mean? And it's like everyone just like has this idea in their head. And you have like people like Kyle Dubas and Andrew Chinish come to our school and go through our program. So those are like, what you're seeing, almost like the posters up on the school, and you're not really thinking about some of the other jobs that can fit in. But I remember that being like a big thing, and how it sort of started for us there.
Yeah, I remember that very vividly.
Mm-hmm.
Adam, who was it? Which prof was it?
It was Professor Hyde.
It was
Hyde?
Hyatt? Yeah.
And I
Okay.
think the hands went down, and I think it was a none of you will be.
Something like that. Yeah, that's kind of what I remember too.
Until someone does it, right?
Yeah.
That's until someone actually gets there.
Exactly.
So okay, so we're not the general managers of the professional club as of yet. Tell us a little bit about your current role. So what does it mean? Maybe Adam, will start with you. What does a manager of baseball communications do with the Toronto Blue Jays? Because maybe that's not a position up until right this moment that has occurred to some of the folks in the room, as it might not have to you back in second year, as you were saying.
Yeah. So, in my role as manager of baseball communications, I'm the lead point person for, basically the link between media, players, front office, personnel, and coaching staff. So if they have any media requests, interview requests, we have a beat media that cover our team on a daily basis, or news stations, national news writers, international news writers. We have a lot of Japanese and Korean media that follow us as well. So basically, over the course of a season, I'm the point person for those inquiries and requests, and I'm also in charge of preparing people on our side of things for the questions they may be asked, and any tough situations that'll be ahead of them.
And if you don't mind, could I ask, what does that look like? I mean, we have this idea that maybe professional athletes are going through media training and things like that. Is that a part of your job, or is it, maybe not as structured as something like that?
Yeah, I think, for what everyone envisions media training is a little more like you go to an external person for that, and they sit down and kind of have a session. I do some media training with especially our younger players in the minor leagues before they come up. And then if someone needs a little, more executive media training, they'll get it, and we'll go to an external source for that. But that being said, I'm definitely I'm a media coach, and I'm doing that almost every day in my interactions with players and coaches. I meet every day with our manager before he talks to the media, as well as any player that talks to the media. I also help prep this is this is a team effort. There's a whole team of us. This isn't all just me, but we help prep for our general manager, and other members of my team help prep our president as well. What it looks like is a lot of emails, a lot of writing, which is probably another thing that Brock was huge for me for, is just focusing on my writing. But yeah, that's what my days look like. A lot of emails, a lot of writing. So
I was giving Alex a hard time about being humble, and there being a progression to the career pathway. You as well have held sort of numerous positions on the way to where you are now. Somebody that's working in communications, what are the steps? What might a student expect to go through on the way to where you're at?
Yeah. For those who haven't been up and down my LinkedIn page, I interned with the Maple Leafs with my Brock internship in the final semester of my fourth year in their media relations department. And, left that internship thinking that was a great experience. I don't know if I'll ever get to do that again. And even when I applied for this Blue Jays job, it was more of a generic application to a leadership development program, which is like a 12-month contract post grad, which we used to have, and it kind of went into dormancy around COVID. But the steps, I volunteered my time at a lot of different hockey rinks, counting a lot of stats and writing a lot of game reports, which you probably couldn't even find on the internet anymore. But when it came to sitting down in the interview for that Leafs job, it didn't matter what the actual product was. It mattered that I had invested the time to do it. And it's just a domino effect. It it started there. It got me in the door there, and I never thought I'd get another chance to A, work for a pro sports team, but B, do it in media relations, which I really enjoyed. And the opportunity came up. I started in the Blue Jays as a specialist / basically a 12-month contract. And just opportunities continued to present themselves, and I just happened to rise to the occasion, basically.
That's great. I appreciate you mentioning some of that grunt work. I often talk with students about, sometimes you can fall into this trap of waiting for a really great opportunity or something that you perceive is going to be a resume builder or something like that.
Yeah.
When it's like, just get the experience, however you can get it. I mean, if you have to volunteer, volunteering is great. If you can get paid for it, that's great. If you're doing it on your own time to gather up some of that experience, it's like, just do the work. And let the accolades and some of the rewards come later. So yeah, thank you for that. Alex, tell us a little bit about Jay's Care. I don't know, Sport for Development is a course that's maybe coming, next year, the year after, for some of the folks that are on the call today. Tell us a little bit about Jay's Care. If you want to go into Sport for Development, what is that? Tell us about what you do.
Yeah, so I guess to how me and Adam are connected, I guess through the organization, is that Jay's Care is like another department, let's say, to the team. So we have communications, you have baseball operations, you have our finance, we have game day, we have ticketing, we have facilities. Like, there are so many teams that make up the Blue Jays. And when I try to explain what Jay's Care does, if there's a game taking place in the field, our team, we actually don't have any hands in the product that goes on. So we're not selling tickets to get people in. We're not promoting the game or giving out giveaways. We're not preparing the comms things that goes out to our teams and our managers. We're not selling the tickets. We're not scouting, but we're rather in the community doing sport for development, right? So when people think about the Blue Jays and think about how are they doing things in the community, it's what Jay's Care does. So we're kind of in our own team and kind of a little bit in our own world. And I think when COVID stopped baseball, people kind of took a step back. They said, okay, there's no more baseball going on. What's going on? How do we get into the community? And that's what we've been doing. So again, we're the not-for-profit of the team, and we run programs for communities throughout the country, and specifically for marginalized youth. So we have 3 sort of sectors. So we run programming for individuals who identify as girls to create safe spaces for baseball. It's called Girls at Bat. We have a program called Challenger Baseball, which is for youth with physical or cognitive disabilities. Then we run a large program in Toronto community housing for families who are living at or below the poverty line. And then the programs that I focus on are mainly in Indigenous communities throughout the country. So we're in years before COVID, my summers were spent traveling. So a lot of the times Adam and the team is there at the Rogers Center on the road if some people are doing that. Whereas I was in remote flying communities throughout the country, launching or helping them run sport for development programs. And what sport for development is basically just using sport as the tool to create change. So for an Indigenous community that's remote, they might like or love the Toronto Blue Jays, and you go there and they love baseball. And we're just trying to provide baseball in a way that they can use it in their community so that they can build, better individuals in their communities, better people. And I know for myself growing up, I think that's a lot of the reason why a lot of us get gravitated towards sport management is because we saw all the friends we made or the life skills that we learned through playing sport and how powerful it can be. And I think sport for development is exactly that. It's just using it in a way that can create change. So you go to these communities who, don't have many things or might not have access to organized sport and things like that. And my job on a day-to-day is to work with community members or people in rec, and we create baseball or softball programs that are, manipulated in a way so that we're trying to not win or lose games, but we're trying to get community members to come out. We're trying to, build youth in a different way that allows them to hopefully be better people for our society as we move forward. And then when we go across the country, we're wearing a Blue Jays logo, right? So the same way Adam's got to create scripts that go to people or different media releases, whatever it might be. Every time we're in the community, people might think I'm a professional baseball player, but far from it. But the things that we say and how we represent ourselves and and what we're doing in the community is clear representation of the team as a whole. So people see us come in and they get excited because they love the Blue Jays, right? And we really just get to just create relationships and hopefully create change while doing it at the same time.
And what was your entry point to the Blue Jays? Did you always started with Jays Care, or what was your path to where you are professionally?
For myself growing up, people just say, like, people now will be like, oh, you studied sport management and then you got a job at the Jays, but a lot of my job is youth-based work, right? Like working with kids and creating programs with community members. And I'd been working at the city of Brampton running camps for like 10 years, like since I was like in grade 9 all the way through at university. I'd coached baseball and I'd done things that way. And then when I graduated, or when I was working at Brock, I worked intramurals. So that was like very related to my job now, like you're creating leagues, you're creating structures and communities for different people. And then when I graduated, just like Adam said, there was a program at Jays Care. It's called the RBI. So every Major League Baseball team has like an RBI chapter. Some teams like produce like draft eligible prospects from that, whereas in Toronto it's just very grassroots. Grades 5 to 8, we're playing underhand softball, right? And we're starting this program in the highest priority schools in the TDSB. And it was 2 days a week for 4 hours coaching an inner city baseball team. And I was taking the train from Brampton, which took like an hour and 15 minutes, to go to a school to coach for 2 hours and make like not even enough to pay for my train ticket, coming back home and just doing that twice a week. And I was doing that and loving it, not even knowing where it was going to go. And then there was a summer position at Jays Care that was for the programs that I'm speaking about, but traveling to them. And they said, you've been coaching this RBI program. We think you'd be a really good fit. We've seen your resume. I applied for that job and I got it. And same as Adam, I went through like 4 contracts, like 4 different titles over a span of 2 years. And now I sit full time for the organization, overseeing all of the Indigenous programs. But it was, I don't know, I just took an opportunity to take something, and I would have been fine walking away, not having anything from it. But I think like sometimes you can't always go into an opportunity thinking like, what am I going to take away from this? Or like a conversation with a grad or industry professional saying like, okay, I'm going to pitch myself and look for this job. Like sometimes things just work out in a weird way. And that was sort of, I don't know, I did it. I took an opportunity that looked really odd, like it was more work to do it than it was giving me back. But in the end, it gave me this role and allowed a bunch of doors to open up for me as I went through it.
Yeah, it's that cliche. It's like, well, what would you do if you weren't getting paid for it, right? Maybe you should make that part of but you actually did it. It wasn't a thought experiment. You were on the train paying your way to get to your various coaching
exactly.
gigs.
I'd be on the train going to a practice, and I'd be like making lesson plans and things like that. And I was like, what? Like you could have coached a team in Brampton and done the same thing, right? But it was, I don't know, an opportunity just to get some experience. And I feel like not every job you do from now going out is going to be perfect and aligned to what you want to do. But again, you take a different experience like that and it might be like, whoa, that was actually a pretty cool experience. I think that could be something that I would like to sort of move into. And for me, it kind of worked right that way.
That's awesome. Adam, you mentioned you spend a lot of time in emails. Could you take us through sort of a day in the life? What does it look like? How do you spend your work day?
Yeah, I have, very segmented parts of my job. In season, regular season is, I would say, less time at my desk and more time on my feet. The biggest part of my job that's not at the forefront of the title, I think, is people management. I spend a lot of time managing personalities, internally and externally, on the media front, executives, coaches, all of that, which everyone does in their everyday life. It's just, I get a little more of the extreme of that. So in season, I'm there first thing in the morning, writing, messaging documents for who's ever going to speak on the day, or preparing my own messaging points for stuff that needs to be delivered verbally. Finding players who need to talk, who have interviews scheduled, doing my meetings with coaching staff who are speaking, and then coordinating those on the field. In game, is definitely one of the perks of my job. Is I watch a baseball game. I have stuff to do, but I'm watching 3.5, 4 hour game, which is not a bad thing if you're a baseball fan. We do press box announcements. We have to make sure it's maintained. There's a food service in there. There's a ton of statistics involved, which is not my specialty, but one of the people that I work with is phenomenal at it. So I assist him as much as I can. And then, preparing for post-game media, which would be starting pitcher, relevant players, and the manager and what they're going to be asked. If it's tough questions, making sure we're aligned on any injury messaging and how that gets out. And then in the off season is just a lot of emailing, and leading up to the season is the same in the sense of, planning. There's a lot of content collection that needs to happen before the season gets going. So, we're talking Sportsnet, ESPN, Fox, any major news station that has the Blue Jays or, MLB baseball on their shows. They get that all in the period that we're in right now, which is what we're working on, getting that in a condensed, normally we would have 2 quiet weeks at the beginning when people are just reporting, but we kind of lost that this year. So it's a little bit of anarchy right now, but we'll get it done. And then in the off season, we have a media guide, which I help out with a little bit, but we have Fan Fest, which we're working on as well, which is a huge media junket for us. Yeah, that's, in a 3-minute answer, kind of what my job is. There's a lot more bumps in the road throughout those days, I promise, but yeah.
I was going to ask, so in the course, we talk about, how to manage personalities, and we spend like a day or maybe a day and a half talking about usually around personalities. How do you make sure that you're taking in the insights and views from introverts versus extroverts versus folks who are conscientious versus folks who are maybe a little bit more inward looking and those sorts of things. But you're dealing with some high performing, presumably the egos are just out of this world, not just on the player side, but on the media side as well. Some of the conflicts, is that having to do with access and wanting to speak with a certain player by a certain time? Or when you're managing those personalities, what does that look like on the ground?
Yeah, I think just to I guess zoom out a little bit, managing any personality is pretty much a trial and error system. It's a steep learning curve, but it's important that you remember the lessons at the beginning, so then you can calculate what someone's response is going to be before it's going to happen, and kind of adjust course as much as you can accordingly. Egos, yeah, that's a huge part of what I do. I think instead of trying to put out a fire, my job is more making sure the fire doesn't even start. That's not to say they don't. They do all the time. You can only do so much. But it's learning, every member of my beat, their habits, what their needs are, what they think their needs are, what their bosses think their needs are, how they react to things. Same thing for players. Do they like media? Do they hate media? Are they indifferent? When do they lift? When do they throw? When do they not want to be bothered? And that doesn't happen overnight. That's all part of managing personalities, and definitely a lot of memory, but you get the hang of it after a little while.
Alex, I'll go to you. Thinking back to your time in the Department of Sport Management through your undergrad, are there skills, whether it's, I imagine a lot of your work has to do with leadership and inspiring folks to work really hard for sometimes, and imagine this is a little bit cliched, but generally it's the case that folks in nonprofit, it's like nobody's getting rich, right? There's a lot of folks that are just there because of the intrinsic value that comes from the positions. They get a lot out of that, whether it's leadership, whether it's teamwork skills. Are there skills that you've learned as part of your undergrad, or maybe in other places too, that you rely on in your day to day?
Yeah, I think for sure there's so many things, a lot of things I think I take away from my university experience. I think like the one biggest thing that I think is so interesting is like in university you're doing projects together with other people that you might not have ever met. And for some of these classes, like there's a certain amount of money that goes into you taking a course. And for some courses and some of those projects, it might be your mark or what you get in that class could be dependent on someone else who you don't even know. And I think for us, you hit it there spot on, but I think like teamwork, communication, all those things sort of work into it. And I think on like a day to day, like I'll be overseeing projects on my own or some with other people on my team. And I think exactly to what you said there, like sometimes people get burnt out and you need to communicate that, or you're having challenges with a partner, but it might just be a communication thing. And I think it's just, Adam kind of hit it in his response there too, but it's all about like building genuine relationships with people. I think in my job is huge because you have to earn someone's trust before they can like allow you into their community or allow you to want to do some of these things. And I think sometimes just because I think it might be the right thing, or it's my job, like this is my job to reach out to community partners and chief and council in a community and say like, hey, we're Jays Care, this is what we're trying to do in your community, this is what we hope to do. And them having other ideas and different things is not a bad thing, but if you want, it's like you almost wanting to step into someone's community or someone's home and telling them the way to do it is not the way to go. So I think just like a lot of those things you learn are just like listening first, internalizing that, thinking about how you should respond, and sometimes saying like, okay, let me take this back to my desk, or let me have some time to think over this so I can give you the best possible response. And I think at the end of the day, you have to understand your own abilities. There's things that I don't know how to do, and I'm not gonna just say I know how to do them, right? You got to look for support in other ways, and I think that'll, in the not-for-profit realm that you just mentioned there, right? A lot of the people I work with, some of them are not baseball fans, and you would think like everyone who works has to be a baseball fan, but like they're in this realm because they are amazing youth workers. They come from backgrounds in child and youth. They're certified teachers. They're social workers, right? And I think you got to lean on those people, especially on my team. And I think that comes from a lot of the things I think you learn in university when it comes to just like being open and clear with communication. In certain courses, it can be very daunting to like, reach out to professor and say like, I need some support, or can I get some feedback in regard to this paper that I just wrote? But if you don't ask for the feedback, you're not going to get, you're not going to get any criticism, or you're not going to get anything that you can improve on. So that's a big part of my work is I'm learning every day. I'm learning new things. And I think when you find a role that allows you to do that, like that's where you should be, always learning, always growing. You don't want to ever be comfortable in one spot doing the same things. That's not doing anything for yourself.
Yeah, and I love the not-for-profit space. Before I started at Brock University, I was working at the provincial sport office for football, and nobody was getting rich there, but we woke up every single day and we tried to make football better in Ontario. It was such a great job. I would wish any one of our students would have that sort of experience of really getting to make a difference in various different ways, right? What you're doing at Jays Care is very different from what we would have been doing with Football Ontario. But there are paths for many students that are motivated by seeing those sorts of outcomes, right? And so this is, Jays Care is maybe one opportunity, but there's lots of other really great organizations doing that type of work that maybe you haven't thought of, before this conversation. But Alex, thank you for bringing some of that up. So in our course, Adam, I'll jump back to you. We're in the middle of a negotiation block where we're spending some time, talking about, a little bit of back and forth. I'm not going to ask you about, your specific contract negotiations or anything like that, but I do want to hear a little bit about your experience in the job market, and interviewing in particular, I think can be sort of a stressful time for students, especially if you're going after that first job. Can you tell us what that looked like for you? Adam, you mentioned it, I don't want to put words in your mouth. It sounds like it started with the internship at MLSE. But you tell me.
Yeah, for sure it did. And even after that, there were a lot of jobs I didn't get between the Leafs internship and this one, which is, I think about often, how happy I am where I am right now. And I came runner up in a lot of different things, and the feedback was that my heart wasn't in it. I show my colors a little too much when it comes to negotiations, I guess. No, but for interviews, I mean, at the Blue Jays for sure. I don't like Alex. I'll be interested to hear your answer on this for the Jays care side of things, but I mean, on the business ops side of things for the Toronto Blue Jays, it is a long process with a lot of different people involved. When I was first hired, I think I interviewed with 8 different groups of 2 each, so 16 people, and that process has only evolved and gotten even more robust. And one of the Blue Jays' biggest things, both, even what goes down to our players, to the staff that we hire, is we just try and hire good people. You don't necessarily have to have all the skills, but we're trying to hire good people. And that's how they try and implement that, is, interviewing with a lot of different people. And that's a lot of different people that you don't have, in my setting, I had no information on who I was interviewing with. It was just like going room to room, like a circuit, whereas in a normal interview setting, they do give you like a heads up of who you'll be interviewing with, so you can do your research, which I would strongly encourage everyone on this call to do when you're heading into an interview. My process at the Blue Jays, which feels like forever ago, was very much just being thrown in a room with some people and trying to read them as best you can and give the best kind of answers you could. Apparently I did an okay job of it, but it was a difficult hour or 2 hours. So
that's a lot. Yeah, forget like measure twice, cut once. It's like measure 8 times with 16 different people. But that's it. It speaks to the importance of finding the right people, right? And how valuable that can be. You make a poor decision in hiring, and it's going to cost you in a million different ways, right? And I'm sure Dr. Kerwin will be talking about that in your HR course next year. Alex, what did the interview process look like for you?
Yeah, for us, I guess it was pretty similar. I can't say we went through so many stages, but when I interviewed, it was like a circuit. So there were actually, I want to say 8 people from the Jays Care team, and it was all the different programs that we have. So we had our executive director there, we had our senior manager of programs, and then we had a specialist or a manager from each of those programs. So like the Toronto Community Housing Rookie League, Challenger Baseball, Indigenous Rookie League, Girls at Bat, and then there were 2 outside people, so from Right to Play, and from another organization I can't remember. And you're seeing the other people that you are also interviewing for the same position, let's say, right? And we had to, our process is a little bit different, but we had to like prepare a tournament plan, saying you're going to like an Indigenous community, there's going to be 8 teams there, set up a plan for it, right? So you had to come with that and be able to elaborate on it. So it was like a circuit style, but same sort of idea. Like, I think the biggest advice I'd give any of you on this call is, as much information as you get, like, read into it. They give you a job posting, like, almost memorize it and know what that's going to be. Know how your skills align to the things that they're looking for. If there are gaps in your experience or the things that you don't have, thinking about how you want to grow or what that opportunity can give you. And I think you just got to be able to speak to the experiences you have or where you want to grow. I think that's a big thing. Like, growth mindset at Jays Care and at the Jays is like a big thing. And from there, I think you just kind of got to just trust yourself in that in your ability to interview. And then now, like since I've been a part of some of the hiring processes, we'll bring on like a panel that has people from other Blue Jays departments. So it's no longer a Jays care perspective on it, but rather just looking at it as like a Toronto Blue Jays employee as we bring on new staff. But I think the big thing, I don't know, Adam, if you feel the same way, but I feel like now that I'm on the other side and sometimes we're reviewing resumes and things like that, I'll be reading a resume and you might only read a resume one time, but there could be like so simply a spelling error, something that doesn't align. And if you have to look through, let's say 300 resumes, that one's already gone, right? And for someone to just look at my resume and say, like, let's put this person in this side. I know now there's like criteria. If you have this, you automatically get pulled. There's systems pull information. But I just think sometimes it's such like right place, right time. And then once you get that interview, you just got to let yourself, you got to just show them all of what you got and leave it right there. And as much as you can prepare, as much as you can reach out to people and say, hey, what do you know? Or what should I be knowing? Like using your network that way, you can never be over prepared going into an interview, but I think you have to just be yourself, right? It's a very nerve-wracking thing to be in, but that person doesn't know who you are, so you just got to speak to yourself. You have all the answers to yourself, right? So that I think was my experience in that sort of space there.
I was having a conversation with some students in the fourth year class the other day about preparation for interviews in particular. And I mentioned one of the great things about whether it's a publicly traded company or not for profit is you have access to so many materials, like strategic plans, reporting documents. There's various things that you can pull from and really get a sense of, well, how can you add value to an organization. If you were applying to the Toronto Blue Jays, what sorts of materials would you be looking to? Like presumably the website, you might start there, but where would your head be?
I think you can kind of go to anything. Yeah, any reports you can find are always good. If you're going into a certain department, maybe you're looking for pieces that relate to that, or if you're thinking about the job task, looking for something that aligns to it. So if you're putting out press releases, looking for press releases, seeing if there's a contact name on it, can start a search into that person or do those things. But I think the big thing to that is that like some information is not going to be presented to you, and that's just what it's about. But I think if you're curious and asking some of the questions when you go to those spaces, always being prepared with some questions and things like that will always put you in a good space. And if you are curious about something, like that might be an opportunity to be able to ask it if you can. But I think whatever you can find is going to be helpful. If you have connections that way too, those can always help. But I'm not sure if Adam has other thoughts to that, if anything exists that way.
Yeah, I think people who have also worked with the organization are helpful. If you find them on LinkedIn, and they moved on to another job, or they don't work in the specific job I think it's tough when you message the person you're applying to the job for. I think like that's fine, but you're not going to get much out of that. I think if you're talking to other people who either work in the organization or have worked there, they'll give you some more candid information that'll probably be helpful in those interviews.
Do you get a lot of informational interview requests?
Yeah.
And what separates what you would consider to be a good request versus, I mean, you just can't have coffee with everybody, right? Like, you're not a mean guy for not saying yes to 100% of the, those many emails that are no doubt, filling your inbox. So, I mean, what advice would you have for students that are maybe considering, sending out a few of those requests?
Yeah. For me, I mean, I was that kid doing that all the time. So for me, the biggest thing that comes down to answering is my workload and how busy I am. I try and say yes to as many as I can. You can only have coffee with so many people, but the Zoom world has kind of gotten rid of that excuse. That being said, I mean, I would go back to what Alex said about a cover letter in terms of like spelling errors, make sure it's clean, keep it pretty brief. I don't need to read too much. That's the point of the interview in the chat. And yeah, I mean, in my case, like I get back to almost all of them. It just matters on how busy I am usually.
Adam, I have a question for you. I don't know. I want to hear your perspective on it. When someone comes in or they reach out to you or something, and they come into their interview and they say something like, I'm a huge sport fan, I'm a huge baseball fan, and I'm just trying to get my foot in the door. What, on the baseball side, how does that sort of reflect, or how does that response go for your team there?
I mean, I think everybody says it. I said it. I mean,
I said it. I absolutely said it.
Yeah, every kid we went to school with said it. So I mean, it's just part of it. I don't think it's a negative thing. I just don't think it makes you unique. That's all. It's not a unique challenge. That's all. So
no, I think the exact same, but I think sometimes on the Jays care side, like in Adam's world, there's definitely a lot less positions because we hire seasonal staff that'll work in our programs, like on the ground, or coaches in communities. So when you're looking at opportunities, there are lots of Jays care roles, and someone might think, get a position with Jays care, work my way in, get my foot in the door, see what I can do. How can I get into baseball operations? And when we hear that in ours, it doesn't matter, because if you're not passionate about, let's say, youth-based work or sport for development, then like you don't belong on this team. Or like we have people who are not baseball fans but passionate about making change, or in indigenous populations, or children and youth living with disabilities. So sometimes when we hear that response, it's just like we're kind of far removed from baseball or that side. So when we hear it, you want to hear people are passionate about the work. Like, I might be passionate about media or communications the same way I might be passionate about youth-based work. But I think what Adam said there, yeah, everyone will say it. I said it. I said I loved baseball and I grew up around it, and I want an opportunity to work in it and see what I can do. And then now when I hear it, I'm like, okay, like I can't bash you for that, because you're the exact same as to what I was when I was applying, right? But
we don't have a lot. I don't have a lot of people. I get where you're coming from on that. I mean, that would be a big flag for me. Don't tell somebody that you want to use them as a stepping stone if you're trying to get an informational interview. It's one thing to think it, it's another thing to say it. So
I just want to hear you guys talk, so I'm just going to step back and see where it goes. Alex, you're pushing Adam to open up, and so just like free for all.
I'm taking advantage of the comms guy now when I got an opportunity.
That's good. Yeah, he's on the hot seat. He's at the podium now, so we can grill him a little bit. I want to ask maybe one or two more like course related ish questions. But I also want to invite, very shortly, I want to open this up for a Q&A. And so for the students that are with us, raise your hand. We'll go in order. If you want to put something into the chat, you can certainly do that. We spend a lot of time in this course in various different ways talking about teamwork. Sometimes it's in small groups or large teams, but we spend a lot of time trying to get better at working collaboratively, working together. What has your experience been in the quote real world? Are teams important to what you do? Are you a lone wolf? And if you've been a part of effective teams, what makes them effective? I apologize, that's a lot of questions, but you could take any one of them.
Yeah, for me, I mean, the comms guy over communicates. That's my rule. If you act as a lone wolf in communications, you're going to get yourself in trouble. You need to, get sign off and get everyone else's input. Oftentimes your thought is not 100% the right one. You might have, 60% of the right answer, and your team will have the rest of it. And that's part of working on a good team and building a good relationship. Working in a group setting, even if it's not in person, text chats, emails, Teams calls, all of that stuff is extremely, extremely important whenever somebody acts on their own, I think that's when things start to get sticky, especially in what I do. So yeah, even if you feel like you're being annoying, there's nothing wrong with over communicating.
I appreciate that. I've never heard it quantified in that way. Sometimes we talk about, you don't always have the right answer, but sometimes you might have 60% of the right answer. I'm going to steal that. That's going to be in the slides next year. Alex, how about you? Teamwork? I'd imagine it's a big part of what you do.
Yeah, it's a big part. So like we're kind of siloed off because we have different programs, but there are multiple people that are on a program. So like there are 2 other people who work with Indigenous partners throughout the country, but there are so many partners that I'm kind of working on my own when it comes to that partner, right? And I'm communicating with the director of rec, the director of education, chief and council, counselors in their community. So like teamwork definitely when it comes to that setting, right? Like I can only prepare as much as I can from the Jays Care side, but when I bring it to a community or to a partner, like that sits with them. But a lot of what we do is co-creating programming or asking for their input, like what's going on in community right now, how has COVID sort of affected you, or what are the youth facing, and how can we sort of create something that does that. So definitely a lot of teamwork that way. And then I think on the Jays Care side too, like we are like a group now that's growing, but when I was on the team, I think we had like 15 people in the office and we were reaching like 45,000 youth. So that means like each person is taking like a large bulk and like running programs that have like, 500 students or something like that. And it's a lot. You're moving so fast because you're trying to do so much. And I think in the not-for-profit realm, you're thinking like, if I operate on my own and I, work harder or work longer, that means more positive outcomes for kids or for youth or for community members. But I think like Adam said, you operate on your own, and on our side, you're going to burn yourself out and you're going to be, sit in a space where you're looking for support, but you have to lean on your team for all sorts of things. And honestly, like on our team and on the Jays Care side, somebody is probably thinking about something that you're looking to do. You might have to adapt it a little bit, but we always say like you have to work smarter sometimes, not harder. And a large part of what we do when like this summer, it'll be traveling to communities, and that's just like physically and mentally draining because you go to a community and you're seeing things firsthand, and it's almost like shock to your body and to your mind because you grew up with so much privilege and so much opportunity. So you gotta depend on people. If you operate on your own, especially in this realm, like you're gonna be burnt out. And when you're burnt out, you can't help anyone. And I think that's what it comes down to at the end of the day, at least for us on our side.
Appreciate that. And this is the last question I'll pose to both of our panelists here. Nice softball, nice general question. If you could go back in time, or what advice would you have for the second year version of you? If you imagine yourself sitting out there in the audience, in the real seats, when we're back to in person, what advice would you have for those second year SPEMA students as they're just about wrapping up, getting to about the halfway point in their undergraduate careers, which would be hard to wrap your head around sometimes. It just flies by. What advice would you have for those folks?
Yeah, I would say, focus on your business writing. Focus on how to write a proper email. It's far more useful than you think it is, I promise. And writing in everything you do is the best way to get better. Everything from, your text messages to, your Twitter posts, whatever it is. And then the other thing I would fall back on is people management in that group work setting that you get an opportunity to do, learn about the people that are in your groups, learn their temperaments, their personalities, and how best to manage those, and understand your own and how those will be received by others.
Thanks, Adam. And Alex, you've got the last word.
I think what I would say is if I was looking back or going to that space, it's that I think while at university or while going through your undergrad, you're not going to exactly know maybe what you want to do or what space you want to get into after graduating. And I think if you can, find little things that you enjoy that might give you some experiences through there, you're going to get connected with so many people. So I don't know. I think the advice I would give is don't ever turn down an opportunity. And I think like connecting to people or building those connections can come down to like, informal spaces. Like it can be intramural sports. It could be, going out, joining a club, doing something else, taking a class maybe that you wouldn't have. And I think through that, like you're going to work on your communication skills. You're going to work on some other things. And I think you just have to be open-minded to so many opportunities. If you know exactly what you want to do and you have a plan, then sure, that's amazing. Go and get it and do what you need to do to get there. But for lots of students, it's like a time of learning. And I think the only time to learn is by just like taking new opportunities and seeking those out. You work an opportunity now, you're gonna maybe say, oh, that's not for me, right? Like you have people who come to us right away and say, oh, I want to be in baseball analytics or scouting, and they've never done it before, right? But if you can take an opportunity to like learn a little bit about that space and what it might be like, then you can learn some things about it. So I don't know. I think my advice would be you just got to take all the opportunities that come your way and look for new ones. And yeah, I think building connections come in such a funny way because even myself and Adam, I think we went to school for 4 years, all of our years, but not until we started working at the Jays did we sort of communicate with one another. But that's just how it goes sometimes, doing different things in different spaces. So take the opportunities as they come. And again, they don't all have to specifically align, but a new opportunity is going to give you one new piece of learning, which hopefully you can carry and use as you move forward.
Yeah, I love that. I love to, say yes to as many opportunities as you can. Like there might come a time in your life when you just can't, right? When you just can't say yes. So to the extent that you can, you got to start accumulating those experiences. I love that. Adam and Alex, thank you so much on behalf of the whole SPEMA department. It's so nice to see you back with us. We'll see you again soon. Thank you for your time, your willingness to share, your candor, some of your experiences out there in the quote real world with us. It's been a pleasure chatting.